Thoreau's Walden, A Philosophy of Better Man, Better Mind, written by Lorena Black for English Composition 1102 on March 21st, 2023. Henry David Thoreau was a 19th century transcendentalist who lived simply in the woods for 2 years and wrote Walden, representing his belief in man's ability to transcend his self-imposed limitations and fulfill his unmeasured potential for excellence. The book was a record of Thoreau's experience and simple life on the northern bank of Walden Pond in eastern Massachusetts. It was an important addition to New England transcendentalism, in addition to being regarded as a philosophical treatise on labor, leisure, independence, and individualism. Walden is also regarded as an influential work of literature and is regarded as Thoreau's magnum opus. Individualism can take a different connotation in the Western world. However, through Thoreau's personal delve into Eastern philosophies, it brings a new light to individualistic actions. Thoreau opens Walden by lamenting civilization's emphasis on wealth and labor above wisdom and experience. He aspires to live simply with only the necessities to increase intellectual and spiritual awareness. He dissects nature to uncover humanity's function on earth and beyond. He drives the idea that the individual is not a means to an end, but a separate living entity that is a part of the universe. The message delivered through Walden by Thoreau speaks of simplicity and focuses on the mind, the soul, and the actions of mankind. Through Thoreau's Walden, the recipe for human prosperity and endless existence is written in ink. As one of the Transcendentalist movement's founders, Thoreau promotes experiential and contemplative activities, believing that learning, not wealth, is the most significant source of sustenance. Thoreau believes that pursuing truth first leads to spiritual understanding, so he is both harsh and empathetic towards those who settle for mediocrity rather than seeking meaningful and educational experiences. Thoreau tells the reader to meaningfully engage with the natural world by observing its beauty, contained in the changing seasons and reflected in the pond's extraordinary pure water, to get insight into what makes a meaningful existence. He builds his own home from natural materials and grows his own vegetables because he values independence. Thoreau finds that living simply and sustainably makes him self-sufficient, as he constructed a tiny cottage on grounds belonging to his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson and was nearly self-sufficient, producing his own vegetables and performing odd tasks. At Walden Pond, he intended to live modestly and have leisure to reflect, wander through the woods, write, and connect with nature. As he remarked, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." Thoreau embodies his personal beliefs through this famous quotation. In this part, Thoreau reflects on industrialization and the things that were happening because of that growth. Industrialization initiated the greatest significant cultural transition in human history since the Neolithic Revolution. Here, history and society merge. Sorry, there was a quotation here in it. I couldn't read through it. Fast technological advancement and a capitalistic economic system have dramatically affected the physical environment and culture. The life of the average person became dominated by labor and consumption. Industrialization allowed for the production and exchange of more products, hence diminishing the need for subsistence agriculture and subsistence agriculture and boosting the need for industrial labor. I don't know. I feel like I wrote that wrong. Perhaps I didn't. It's not noted. When rural laborers moved to urban areas for work, their connections to nature deteriorated. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all of the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like, as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. Why is it so important to simplify in order to maximize our amazing experiences, because we can only be our authentic selves if we simplify ourselves. In other words, and individuality is impossible if we're burdened by things, whether they're material possessions such as clothing or furniture, or other people's views. Walden is a tribute to individualism, and through Thoreau's experience in the woods, he learns that we conduct our lives in a way that prevents us from being in touch with our true selves. We're weighed down by one too many things. And if it provided to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish it in its meanness to the world? Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me, are in a strange uncertainty about it, whether it is of the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man here to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Thoreau isn't simply detailing his time spent living in the woods, but also wants us to learn from that experience. Thoreau went into the woods to discover the meaning of life by living deliberately and sucking the marrow out of life. According to him, the outcome of the experiment demonstrated unequivocally that we must express our individualism rather than stifle it, and society frequently requires. Thoreau is heavily influenced by his close friend Emerson and other transcendentalists of the day. Born and raised in Concord, of a rebellious and introspective disposition, an ardent fan and subsequently a close friend of Emerson, he was easily influenced by the prevalent transcendentalist beliefs through his formative years. Transcendentalism was a 19th century movement of New England writers and philosophers who adhered to an idealistic system of thought based on a belief in the essential unity of all creation, the inherent goodness of humanity, and the superiority of insight over logic, and experience for the revelation of the deepest truths. As a Harvard undergraduate, he had a spiritual transformation after reading Emerson's controversial essay, Nature. In the woods is perpetual youth, he read. Within these plantations of God, a decorum and sanctity reign, a perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods, we return to reason and faith. Following this exciting vision, college academics were even more monotonous and pointless than they had been previously. He desired to be a visitor of nature's celebration rather than following his peers into the woven grove of tradition. Thoreau frequently visited Emerson and discussed topics of common interest with him. The older, already famous guy enjoyed his new acquaintance, as demonstrated by the following note in his journal. I delighted much of my young friend, who seems to have as free and erect a mind as any I have ever met. Following Emerson's advice, Thoreau began keeping a notebook and pursuing his dreams to become a writer at this time. Although Henry David Thoreau has been known for a variety of things to a variety of people, his primary legacy as a thinker and writer will always be that of a transcendentalist. The rest of our judgments about him must be made considering this reality and as a correlity to it. Whether he was experimenting in life at the Walden Pond, going to jail for refusing to pay his poll tax, or defending John Brown's actions at Herpsay Ferry, he was operating from a base of transcendental principles. Thoreau, more than anyone else, was able to put his beliefs into practice daily. As a prominent practitioner of self-reliance, Emerson often rebelled against the demands and customs of society. With a modest request, he devised to provide even less. Institutions were mostly the desire of the dead, to subjugate the living in his view. He would neither respect nor accept them until they fulfilled his relevant criteria. Neither did he fear for being alone and isolated. Thoreau advocated regularity and vehemently for a simple life and eradication of common labor. Nearby farmers enjoy natural lives but rarely have time for recreation, and Thoreau advises readers to explore the world's unexplored areas to find freedom. He describes how his basic living and spiritual quests go together, how he believed hunters and fishermen were closest to nature. Thoreau shows how self-centered emotions drive human behavior by examining different self-sustaining vocations. He then explores how industrialization and mass agriculture business have badly influenced how most Americans interact with the environment, notably meat eating. Thoreau also contrasts human and animal impulses, stating that people have better intellectual capacities yet do not taste or ponder their food. Thoreau's careful observations of forest creatures revel nature's bigger challenges. While he had fewer guests in winter, in housewarming, Thoreau enjoys keeping his home warm and attractive. He emphasizes the lake's calm on foggy mornings and loons October's arrival to show how the scenery transforms to fall. Thoreau recalls how the lake freezes and is covered with snow in November, and he gets fascinated by Walden's vast depth, which prompts him to measure the far-forgotten bottom of the pond. In Winter Animals, Thoreau observes how animals' behavior changes, from rats scavenging for food and his leftovers to bands of hounds chasing foxes. Thoreau seeks to match human awareness with the Earth's natural cycles, even when nature's imperfect rules occasionally exceed intellectual ability. In Spring, Thoreau assesses mental nutrition as nature awakens after winter. Walden's purpose is to help readers cope with emotional and physical transformation via meditation and nature. We can witness this theme in his work throughout his description of nature and his cognate argument for running our lives parallel with nature than against it. Thoreau outlines the transcendentalist ideas of individualism, emphasizes how the freedom to pursue one's goals while focusing on the essential aspects of life rather than wealth and fame nurtures the spirit. Thoreau despised men's avarice, their desire to amass riches, and their servile attachment to possessions, and this is profoundly expressed in Walden. It was painfully obvious to him, and he attempted to convince others that the process of enrichment nearly always led downhill. It pained him to imagine humans spending most of their waking hours on jobs that tended to be brutalizing. Self-reliance, Emerson wrote, emphasizes the importance of following one's intuition and ideas as opposed to social norms. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. Emerson. The core of Thoreau's social experiment in the execution of Emerson's The American Scholar and Self-Reliance described notions. He spent nearly 2 years living alone in the forest to illustrate that the meaning of life and social processes may be better understood when one is alone. Nature, by Emerson, had an influence on Walden's endeavor. The fundamental argument of the article was the relevance of revealing the cosmos's order via one's life experiences. Thoreau moves into the woods to front only the essential facts of life so that he might escape society's false values and become closer to God, nature, and the cosmos. Thoreau expressed in his journals and his renowned article, Life Without Principle, criticism from business people, those who place money above all else and sacrifice their morals in pursuit of it. He stated in a sarcastic tone, most are engaged in business the greater part of their lives because the soul abhors a vacuum, and they have not discovered any continuous employment for man's nobler facilities. The race to obtain California's newly discovered gold struck him as an excellent illustration of the negotiation of human effort. I saw of no more startling development of the immorality of trade and all the common modes of getting a living. It is not enough to tell me you worked hard to get your gold. So does the devil work hard. Thoreau's attraction to the concepts of philosophical anarchism was unavoidable. According to Emerson, he was a born Protestant. He interrogated every custom and wished to settle all of his practice on an ideal foundation. Compulsion to pursue a course of conduct consistent with his transcendental principles could not help but highlight his innate individuality. Walden is divided into chapters documenting the seasons and his experience in paralleling that ebb and flow. Beginning with economy, Thoreau discusses his experiment and provides a full description of the building and expense of his cabin. In reading, Thoreau praised the benefits of reading, but in sounds he acknowledged the limitations of books and urged the reader to live thoughtfully, always on alert, to the sounds and sights in his or her own life. Solitude celebrated the kind of nature which rendered the imagined beliefs or human proximity meaningless. Following visitors were higher rules, winter creatures, and spring. Thoreau studies how nature's inner workings reflect human consciousness in the woods. He recommends reading classical philosophical works regarding spiritual truths and the human predicament to cultivate intellectual purity. Thoreau examines nature's finest sights and sounds. He can meditate with simply the sounds of nature, even when the Boston-bound train hisses. Thoreau enjoys watching animals and other elements of the wood interact, such as when a whippoor wills and owls sing. He says seclusion lets him fully experience nature, making it the perfect mate. As he can hear church bells and receive visitors, Thoreau claims he is not wholly alone. He says he enjoys spending time with basic people. Thoreau says he admires natural people who dwell in the woods more than his rare academic excursions. These folks are free from society's laws and are more connected to nature than most civilized people. After a few visits to the village, Thoreau finds comfort and tranquility in the woods, where he is reminded of why he dislikes his neighbors' restrictions, requirements, and misguided ideas. Throughout Walden, Thoreau enjoys spending his endless amount of free time nourishing his mind, reading about Hinduism, immersing himself in philosophy, and reflecting on his life and meaning. He can afford this because his labor does not consume his life and gives him the satisfaction of indulging in the things he wants to learn about and study. He uses Walden as verifiable proof to the transcendental arguments of individualism. In Walden, Thoreau shows us how the growth of industrialization can overshadow the truth of individualism. In the modern day, this advancement in industry has grown to satellites orbiting the Earth or other such advancements that have united our element of communication. It has driven us even farther from the connection we have to nature, which is the road to prosperity, intelligence, and personal growth. This would be the recipe for honest individualism that would lead us to self-reliance. With the arrangement of the U.S. work week, working class people work to the absolute threshold. The minimum wage is just high enough to incentivize people to show up to work, but too low to provide basic housing and healthcare, let alone a family, in most towns and cities. An unnecessarily laborious work week leaves the average American with very little leisure time. When people get free time, they spend it on mindless recreational activities such as watching television because they work to exhaustion. In the U.S., 85.8% of males and 66.5% of females work more than 40 hours, about 1.5 days per week. Compared to Japanese people, Americans work 137 more hours per year and 499 more hours per year than French workers. However, Thoreau did not work for other people. When he labored, such as when he built his cabin on the shore, it was for his benefit, something useful to him that no one could take from him. By only working for him, what he needed, and to an ethical extent, he gained the free time needed to foster the universe's intelligence and the human condition. This was not only because he had the time to study, but also because he got the opportunity to observe and sink into nature. Therefore, Walden shows the reader how transcendental consciousness is of great benefit. Frequent exposure to this fourth state, known as transcendental consciousness, is claimed to result in quick and accumulative activities for the person, development toward the most advanced states of consciousness, ergo enlightenment. Maharishi argued that when individuals experience transcendental consciousness, they come into direct contact with the unifying field of natural principles. When an individual is thus attained to the source of all the laws of nature, the organizing intelligence that maintains life through the vast cosmos and fosters the evolution of millions of species on Earth, both the body and mind function with the efficiency and effectiveness of nature's intelligence. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was an Indian yoga guru known for developing and popularizing transcendental meditation for being the leader and guru of a worldwide organization. Scientific investigations on the transcendental meditation technique have proven that regular practice of transcendental consciousness significantly enhances both physical and mental performance. In contemporary psychology, self-actualization comes closest to Vedic enlightenment. Self-actualized individuals have realized more of their inner potential in all aspects of life, such as personal interrogation and stability, self-respect, emotional maturity, warm interpersonal relationships, and the capacity to deal with adversity. Self-actualized individuals can be related to individualism, where the goal of the movement would be to live in a manner that was true to your being. A statistical meta-analysis of all known trials, 42 independent outcomes, compare transcendental consciousness to concentration or contemplation-focused relaxation and meditation techniques during the transcendental meditation program. In this comprehensive comparison analysis, transcendental consciousness enhanced self-actualization. Users of this have degrees of self-actualization that is rarely reported in scientific literature. Thoreau and Maharishi wrote and practiced their philosophies at different times. Space exploration started in the 1960s. Therefore, literature was about the only way to truly travel the world. The influences that Emerson and Thoreau experienced through their reading bled into their own thought processes and emerged into their writings and personal endeavors. The same can be said for those on the other side of the moon, the tides, or the world. Whether Maharishi was influenced by Thoreau or not makes no difference, for these two understood that true individualism is a service to the source, the universal connection we all have, whether animal or plant. Thoreau's wild comparisons of unsuitable cultural norms were viewed as an assault on aesthetic judgment as well as religious devotion. However, for many of these early critics, Thoreau's issue was largely theological. He clearly touched a raw chord by raising the Buddha to the same level as Christ and elevating Eastern writings along with Western traditions. Of course, liberal educated readers of 1849 were not unprepared for abstract objections to the Christian faith's ascendancy. What they found difficult to accept was this bold assault on Christian supremacy through a series of irreverent comparisons with various preposterous Hindu, Buddhist, or Chinese religious forms. Walden is many things, but overall a study. These studies suggest that the exposure to the fourth level of consciousness daily improves human functioning, for the actions of Thoreau and Walden fed the continuation of those actions, for he was in fact living simply by allowing his brain to meditate and function simply. Thoreau noted that the great majority of individuals are awake solely for physical labor. He writes, "Morning is the most memorable time of the day, and it is a time when we awaken. Then we experience the least somnolence for at least an hour. A portion of us that sleeps the rest of the day and night wakes. Just around 1 in a million people are sufficiently alert to engage in productive and intellectual activity. All intelligences arise with the dawn, asserts the Vedas. The Vedas are regarded as one of the Hindu religion's holiest texts. They are said to be among the oldest texts of the world. Thoreau comments, "Poetry and art, as well as the noblest and most unforgettable of men's deeds, stem from this era. All poets and heroes, including Menahem, and an offspring to Aurora, and their melody is unleashed at dawn. Let us rise early and fast, or break the fast quietly and in peace. Allow visitors to arrive and go. Why should we go against the grain? Some opponents may have called him a social rebel due to his views. It is a lovely reminder and a loving warning to the busy bees of mechanical life who have forgotten the truth and the need for stress elevation. It is important to recall that Thoreau never advocated intentional sloth. Thoreau closed his piece by saying that our sense of time is shallow or restricted. It is an internal existence." Henry David Thoreau traveled to Walden Pond alone, emphasizing the idea of living with only the basics and independence. Thoreau promotes the notion of living simply by emphasizing life with only what is necessary. The Transcendentalists as a group spearheaded the celebration of the American experiment as one of individuality and self-reliance. With regard to women's rights, abolition, reformation, and education, they held progressive positions. They questioned the government, organized religion, legislation, social structures, and industrialization's gradual advance. The central theme of Henry David Thoreau's Walden is to discover the purpose of life. He started off to ponder life, himself, and the purpose of man in the world. By keeping man's power personal and allowing him to understand and realize his potential, he may find a strong purpose in life despite the circumstances of society. To absorb the beauty of transcendental knowledge and ideals, we must ascend from what we are to what we can become. Through Thoreau's experience, we may find an endless melody to dance to, since regardless of where we are in terms of cognition, sharp or dull, the ability to nourish our potential resides at the core of our being. Walden speaks of unity, faith, and economic freedom.